for joining us. This is take two. We had a bit of a problem, but my friend here is Dr. Andrew Faelatua, and up there's a body of his work that he's been involved with, and we've been able to have him talk about his future projects. But in the meantime, before I get sort of cut off, I need to get him to talk more. So he achieved success in his education as a lecturer at the Conservatorium of Music, receiving a postgraduate, as well as navigating through the New Zealand film industry. And its evidence of work is above here with some great movies like Three Wise Cousins, Take Home Pack, Hibiscus Ruthless, and all amount of body of score music, fusing Pacific sounds and jazz or modern sounds all together. And then in the same time, he's been able to conduct lectures and studies, and we're mentoring lots of people. And he's back in New Zealand at this time. And okay, oh, shut up, Fraser. Let him talk. Okay, over to you, brother.
No. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate all of that, and yeah, have been really blessed to have had opportunities in the industry in different areas, different contexts. Started out as a jazz pianist at the University of Auckland, and that kind of led to. I actually started out in that. It's funny how I got into that. I was kind of playing church music. My dad's a whaiwhiao, and then I couldn't really play. It's funny. I went to university to do maths, and then in my maths degree, I took a general education paper on music, and I went to that, and I was like, man, I'd love to do music. So then I went through this unofficial kind of audition. I said to the lecturer, hey, can I show you some of my piano? And he goes, solo for me. And I was like, what's a solo? So I was that ignorant. So I played some of my piano. Like I love music, obviously. And he said, hey, you got a talent. Set up sort of a special interview kind of thing, and then they put me into this. It was like a preliminary program to learn how to play just the basics of jazz piano. Got in, was like the worst player in class. Every time it came around to my solo, I was like, oh, here we go. But just had like a real desire for music,
Wow.
and then just put my hand to the plow. Ended up doing really well in jazz piano. That then led to postgrad scholarships and so forth. So that's kind of where I started out in education. Went on tour. That's where I think we met in American Samoa, or was it in Apia? One of the two.
Yeah.
Um, got to tour and kind of fuse jazz with Samoan music, which is part of my rich cultural heritage, which I'm proud of. And then during the jazz piano, kind of got approached by Stallone Iowasa, who was working for Fresh TV, and he was directing his first film, Three Wise Cousins, and he said to me, "Hey, I love your jazz sound. Maybe
Mm.
that's the new sound we're looking for in our feature film." So then I came on board with him, got thrown in the deep end because there was some jazz, but then there were other parts like pop music, and could we have a classical scene for this, and could we have this for this, and all these other styles of music that I was unfamiliar with. So I was on YouTube learning how to play percussion, learning how to a lot of self-taught, kind of learning how to use the technology, and then yeah, did quite well in that. Discovered a knack for that. Discovered that I really love composition. That led to another thing, and then at the same time, so while my professional career as a composer performer was growing, obviously I was still within the institution. I've always had a desire to keep growing and learning, and kind of just keep those two going on. They seem to be they complement each other. Learning about music and then doing music, and it's kind of this back and forth process. So yeah, had a reasonably long history so far, over a decade in the game, and still learning. Still have that thirst to learn. Currently a fellow at the University of Huddersfield in the UK, and engaging in some projects back here. It's nice to fly back for some nice warm temperatures, and I've got an NFL project happening, which is confidential. I can't go into the details, but it's NFL related. And then New Zealand Opera is another one that I'm working on. So yeah, continuing to just have that thirst for learning and growing, and ultimately all of it is driven by my vision, which is to push the envelope for Pacifica musical expression and inspire others to do the same and to learn about the richness of this beautiful art form. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Bravo. 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 When I look, when we look at the body of work there, to the Three Wise Cousins and Hibiscus Ruthless, and I'll just play a little bit of it so the audience can get an appreciation. So, So there's a little bit of that sound there, and you can hear the rhythms, that you talked about. So I'm going to contrast that because I always rib you about this being part of his music. You got to have a six pack, you know. So have
Hey, Mexico, hey.
So I just wanted to play a little bit. One more contrast, if you don't mind. I'll put this on here, and this is from the Take Home Pack. So this is, and I'll play a bit, and I'll play a little bit more. Hold on, I'm going to make a point here. Which is one of my favorite ones here. Okay, I'd love to play more, but my point, what I'm trying to say to the audience here with the production is that you can hear the mingling and meshing of the Pacific sound. Then you can hear the production of what you'd hear from a big movie, in the theater, sitting there watching a movie, ambiently coming through, and you've got all of these crossovers blending in there. And I'm just interested to ask you, um, it's like a new industry, this mission, that's what, and you're one of the progenitors of this new, and there must be others out there permeating, think about, oh, I could do this too, so how do you see the landscape of this new synergy of music fusion, Polynesian music, jazz, in the film industry? And this is you as a music producer, but then you've got writers that are coming alongside with you with an idea. Could you describe that landscape, because it's an exciting time? I see that.
Yeah, it is an exciting time. There's a group called PISA, Pacific Island Screen Artists, which I'm a part of, and it's basically, it happens every week, and
Wow.
together a network. So anyone who's wanting to get into Pacific related, film, directing, editing, producing, music composition, PISA is the place to be. A little pitch for those guys. But basically, I've been,
No, that's great. Talk more about that.
yeah, and the reason I bring that up, because I think that that gives some insight into some exciting things that are happening. So there's a lot of young writers, up and coming writers, young and old, and everyone's got an amazing story to tell, and they really emphasize that, like putting our Pacifica stories up on the big screen. So I've noticed from these networking sessions, like, man, there's a wave of Pacifica films coming out from all these budding directors who are, they're in touch with the latest, because everything's up online now. You can learn almost anything, through YouTube, whatever. And so they're picking up all the tools of the game, and they're practicing, they're putting it into action. And so I can actually see, I'm like, wow, there's a new wave of films coming out, which means we need more producers, we need more film composers like me. And so, yeah, that landscape, it's pretty exciting to see what's sort of happening in that world. And
Wow.
it means more work for people like me, but it also means that others can get on board the waka, and we're all heading in that direction, which is to put our stories up on the big screen, tell some amazing experiences that we've had, or support other stories or our histories and so forth. So it's pretty exciting. it's a pretty exciting time to be living in.
Yeah. You know, earlier before we got cut off, you talked about your career with the education, but there was a chance meeting that happened. Someone noticed you, you know, and it always is like that, eh? So
Mm.
did the phone call or the, you know, the opportunity. Can you just re-describe that opportunity that came your way that opened that door for you to have a look in the room, go, oh yeah, this is something
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can,
yeah.
yeah,
I think that's a really good point that you make right away. Just keeping your eyes peeled, like be aware of when the opportunity might come in disguise. You never know,
yeah,
and pursuing what you love and what you're doing. So at the time, I was talking about how I was on tour with my group across Samoa and American Samoa for I think it was the very first Samoana Jazz Festival, and so we're fusing jazz and just as a composer, as a performer, I always want to express music that represents who I am, things that I'm passionate about. So I was fusing together the language of jazz that I picked up at the University of Auckland, learned how to play
wow,
swing and all the different sort of forms, and then what can I do? How can I put my unique spin on it and my
wow.
creative flair? So I was like, let's bring in some traditional Samoan rhythms. So it would have like the sa sa or the whakapaki or the ailau rhythm, and so I was about trying to sort of fuse that with what I knew. So I was pursuing that unique sound, the expression of jazz, and then what actually happened was Fresh TV crew came over because my drummer was famous still in the lycée. So they came to come. They came to come. They didn't come for me. Um,
Yeah.
they were following him around, and then I think they caught wind of our new sound that we were kind of creating. And one of the people who was working in Fresh TV, I'm not sure if he still is, Stallone Ayawasa. He's now a very well established director. He heard that sound and was like, "Hey, I'm writing a feature film. I'm looking for a new sound. That sounds awesome. Would you like to bring that on to this project?" So it kind of just happened as I was doing what I love and pursuing that, and then that was different because I was like, I'm into jazz piano, I'm into improvisation, ephemerality of a performance, like being and gone in the moment. But then I was like, okay, whatever. Jumped on board and then discovered a new love. I was like, oh, I love it's kind of like art. I've been into drawing, perfecting something, going back over and over it, revising it and perfecting it. And I really liked it about composition, so I kind of fell into it. So yeah, you're right.
Wow, wow.
It was just like a divine sort of. But I had
Yeah,
to keep my eyes open to the opportunity for sure.
yeah, and the body of work that we see here that is most viewed by a lot of fans of Pacific music. Can you describe maybe just for the audience that are wanting to be interested when you're actually approached about a story, say Three Wise Cousins? I hope that's a good example. Um, just for all of us that are not aware, are you given the storyboard and and a concept of the story? You shake hands with the actors. You're watching clips of production, and does the music emanate from there as you see the scenes getting like a jigsaw puzzle? Here's the middle part. Here's the sad part. Here's I'm pissed off with you part. You know, is that basically the concept of it?
Yeah, I think that's like the gist of it. You get different combinations of different things, but generally, I always make sure this is something that I do anyway. They give you the script. I want to know the vision behind the story. Like, what story are they trying to tell? I think that really helps. Otherwise, you can go in different directions with music. There's like infinite sort of possibilities of what you can do with different scenes. But if you know the vision, then it's like cool. Um, with whatever emotion that I'm shaping and so forth, I know the ultimate sort of end goal with different parts of the film. Like it's important to know, like you said, the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle and what puzzle that is ultimately going to make in the end. So usually they give me the script. I'll read over that. I like to kind of talk to the director about what they're doing. I think that helps too, rather than just kind of reading about it. Just talking about it, getting them to really just you can feel the emotion and the drive and the vision that they have, making sure that you catch onto that fire, and then after that, yeah, it can be different things. Sometimes I think generally they send me the scenes, all of the scenes with what they call temporary music, that's kind of on there, which means that you have to compete with what they've got. So they might have like a scene and be like, I like this Pirates of the Caribbean music, and I'm like, oh gosh, I need to compete with it.
Wow.
But then the way that I approach that is okay, if they've got like a John Williams score or something as their temp track, there's no way I can compete with that. But I can bring me to the puzzle. Like, what's
Yeah,
my Pirates of the Caribbean? What's the Samoan Pink Panther? What's like Andrew's version of this? And then trying to be unique and approach it like that. So that's sort of the process. They send the script, they send the usually all the visuals, and then they have an idea of the kind of tone that they would like for a scene, and then
yeah.
you have to kind of swap it out and put your music in, and then that's the whole process in itself as well.
So, how much time as a like in your production, in your home production, um, eh, eh, that's you describing the process of the little template, and then do you move to that big house production to finalize all of that concept? So,
Yeah,
how?
so yeah, for sure. Sorry, there's like the time where you're in solitude and you're kind of chipping away at it, but then, as you say, you've got to be in connection with the director, the editor, the producer. Yeah, get to meet the actors in that as well, and I think those relationships are really key as well in the in the music making process because I've been in that trap before where I'll kind of be in my studio in my home, like, yo, I got this. I'm gonna just pump out the best music, send it, and I remember through as cousins, I made big mistakes. I kind of went on my own buzz and I created these long 12-minute scenes. I thought that was it. This is the music. Sent it to the director and it wasn't quite sort of on. And I've learned through the process of just repeating it, learning from mistakes, falling flat on my face, and then learning how to avoid that. Communication's a big one, so making sure that I find out from the director, is this music kind of in the right direction? So one of my biggest secrets is send little snippets, um, and then from those snippets they can kind of expand on them. And yeah, they often there's this back and forth process of like traveling. It's best if you're in person, traveling into the office um, with the companies that I've worked with. They generally have like a room that's nicely set up with speakers that kind of um, they sort of like a simulation exercise. You can get a sense of what it would be like in the cinema with some sort of surround. We have 5.1 mix, and we do a little watch down and we watch drafts. If the drafts are good, we're like, cool, we'll expand on this sound. So it has to be a back and forth process of developing, like growing the composition, as opposed to me in my studio. I'll just get all the music done, send it to you, and then we're good to go.
That's amazing. I was just going to say, um, the take home pay. Each of these moved like the three wise cousins and that. Were there points of difference in the way you approach the music? I mean, it still has a Polynesian element in it, but because as a composer, you're always wanting to move forward. You don't want it to be. Sure, you want to have your unique style in it, but was that in your mind when you approached the next project? You know,
Yeah,
which is
definitely. I think a lot of the innovation, probably give credit to the director, Stallone
oh, okay.
Ayahuasca. He always wanted to move forward with his work, and so that kind of had a flow on effect for me as well. Like there are those comforts. Like sometimes when I'm feeling tired, I remember composing stuff and sending it through for take home pay, and then the response is like, "Yeah, this sounds like Three Wise Cousins."
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, "Oh no!" And so it's always like, what kind of yeah, I'm always looking at pushing the boundaries. And so with Three Wise Cousins, it was more like sort of like pop music a lot of the time, a lot of songs with vocalists in them and so forth. Take Home Pay was probably more going for that standard cinematic orchestral sound. But like, what's the Samoan orchestra going to sound like here in terms of all the standard orchestral instruments, but with the log drums and with like, um, you know, sort of Pacifica inspired harmonies and so forth. So that one was more orchestral. In Mama's Music Box, which is like another sort of different sound. That was the Christmas sound, the nostalgia of like Home Alone with the log drums. So there's always like different approaches. Definitely, it's a conscious approach, as you say, like actually thinking about it differently and consciously trying to break with the old way of doing things, unless that's required. But generally, we're always pushing the envelope and moving forward.
Wow. Can you highlighted uh, Polynesian filmmakers? Are you able to share? You did share one of them, but are there others that you're involved with, and without any disclosing future projects? But can you share the landscape of Polynesian filmmakers out there? Is that possible?
Yeah, yeah. So obviously Stallone, he was like the one who got me into the game in the first place. So mad respect for him. And then his sister Dinah, she's been involved in other projects too. And so Once a Panther was another one I did
Wow.
with Brad Flahive, I think that's his surname, and Alex Liu. Apologies if I got their surnames wrong, but yeah, they did the Once a Panther project, which is really awesome. Again, different sound, different stories being told, different emotions. Um, One director that I really enjoyed working with recently, Gabriel. Oh my gosh, Salty's the surname. It's been a little bit. It's been like a year and a bit since my last project with him, and he Australian-based, amazing director, and he did a project on speaking out against sort of subtle racism that happens like in the film industry with First Nations peoples and in particular Pacifica peoples. He was really really cool as well, and every director's kind of got their own style too, and so I think it's about trying to adapt to those different styles and learning how to read the different directors and what they mean by certain things that they say. So, Andrew, I want epic for this scene. I'm like, what does epic mean? Everyone's epic is different,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So, yeah, working with these different directors. So, yeah, in Australia here, um, I think every director's it's quite cool. They got their own DNA, their own flavor, and it's about trying to sort of meet their vision in the process. So, yeah, I've enjoyed that. So, I'm still expanding mine. I don't know a lot outside of that. There's still more people to meet. And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so I've had
Yeah.
Australia, New Zealand. So far, it's mostly been between Australia and New Zealand. And the guy that I'm reaching out to this American dude. Oh, he's reached out to me actually, and I don't know him that well yet, but going in there with the can-do attitude and ready to learn from other directors. So yeah, there's a lot of aspiring ones out there.
Mm.
Um, a lot of yeah inspirational work that's happening.
I just wanted to take back to your early part of the career as the end of this interview, and thank you so much. But you have been involved in teaching in the Sydney Conservatorium of Music and others, and you mentioned Huddersfield. I think that's in England.
Yeah,
Um, and I suppose my question is directed about jazz being the International Jazz Day by Herbie Hancock at the end of the month. And what I wanted to ask, so here we have a music which is America's greatest export, right? Jazz. That's the language, right? And over the last 30 years, from what I see, is maybe 40 years, this 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 language has been transcribed and analyzed, and a whole plethora of young people are now enjoying the benefit of the transcription of artists as such. And then you're part of that academic that is able to concisely present a a class or course in order for them to gather the language. Now, my question is that absolutely, we borrow the language and the artist in order to what's my language going to be? That's the story that we and so what I'm asking you from the Jazz International Day, um, have you seen it within your class and experience of people grappling with the same story I've had? Like, oh wow, I've pulled this voice, that voice, and now I've identified who I want to be with this music, and you certainly demonstrated in your part, but I suppose that's a pretty healthy scene to describe what's happening with people who benefit from learning jazz as the beginning of their career. Is that you've seen examples of people that have gone on and
yeah,
produced?
definitely. Yeah, yeah. A lot of my mates. So it's quite funny because obviously like classmates learning jazz and so forth, and people have headed off in different directions. Some of them have stuck to sort of more traditional forms of jazz. Others have kind of branched off into other forms of like popular music and so forth. So I think there is always that grappling in the classroom, which is part of the learning. Like you're learning, so much of your energy and time is focused on learning the language of the greats, which is awesome. And there's that natural sort of like, am I just going to be a replica of what's happened? And that realization, I think, especially near the end of, I remember sort of near the end of my studies, and I find it in the classrooms as well, like in that stage 3, moving into postgrad, like cool. So I've learned this now, um, almost like this innate sense or this responsibility of like, where do I fit now? Like, how do I apply what I've learned? And so everyone grapples with it, I think, well, from my experience, students in the classroom, and I often just encourage them. It, it may not sound super practical, but what are you drawn to? Um, what do you naturally sort of gravitate towards? What energizes you in terms of the music? Because some people may feel like they've learnt the jazz language and they might be like, oh, if I get on pop, I'm a I'm betraying the jazz. They might have a certain idea about jazz. See, for me, I'm playing jazz. I'm still playing jazz in all my film music and everything. Even my process, I always improvise things, string lines, drums, whatever. The language of jazz and improvisation, and being able to just channel a love for music, and doing that spontaneously. That's what I learned in jazz. And so, in my mind, I'm always playing jazz, whether I'm doing a scene for a film that I've been over 100 times, or I'm
Yeah.
improvising something. Yeah, jazz is just like my language, um, for all the musical sort of mediums that I engage in.
Wow. Yeah. And we talked earlier that you may be uh, moving a little bit back there to jazz performance, your solo piano. You had a chance to talk a little bit with me about that. Is that right? Is that
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yep, I've always kind of jammed on the side. Like, I shouldn't say on the side. Like, I'm playing jazz for my film projects, but in terms of like just piano, like, and more traditional probably styles of jazz, I've recently kind of gone back to it, which is interesting because I used to have that, because I came through the institution. I think I picked up the wrong idea. It's about the best licks or the most like sophisticated scales. Like, can I play an altered scale on this and the upper structures? I've kind of come back to it now after having more experience in music and just having a love for music, and like, oh, why don't I just play this for the love of it? Like, and it's kind of
wow?
been more of a sort of starting out as just a fun thing, and now I'm like, oh, maybe I could do some fun projects, um, improvising with jazz again and going back to the like more traditional sort of focus, but doing it for the love. I was listening to Oscar Peterson the other day, like, man, this just makes me feel happy. I instead of analyzing every single note he's playing, like, man, how does this make me feel? So I'm kind of on that journey of going back to the piano again and jamming and soloing and doing it for the joy that I derive from it, as opposed to like getting the best upper structures or the most impressive scales. So my mates go, "Oh, you just played that upper structure."
Oh man, I just really loved and enjoyed having you on to share your work and also your perception of music in general, and also the relationships that you've had with the actors, the film producers, and your future aspirations to creating more projects, but more people to meet. I like the way you described that. Then they're on their way as we're speaking. But one last thing I'd like to ask you. Um, Being a person who has achieved the body worker, you're very young and you're moving forward. What sort of advice um, to our listeners would you give if they're moving into film? You mentioned a network group that meets to correlate what they want to do. Is there any advice you'd give to any young Polynesian or film music production that they could probably follow? Besides going to your website and following you, and your work, but is there anything that you could suggest that they could access? And that's for free. I think you mentioned network groups. I think that's the power of
Yeah, yeah,
the
like
internet.
for sure. Like I mentioned, PISA, Pacific Island Screen Artists. I think there's a small subscription fee, and they meet like every. It's called Ipuki, where they kind of come together and just network. There's like it's like speed dating. They'll put you in this like little rooms, and then there's like a time limit, but you got to like tell them about what you do, and that I think that's a great
Wow.
entrance into the like. It's an entry point into the field. My advice, yeah, is networking people, relationships, and making sure that you have that overarching why. Like, ask yourself, why is it that I'm attracted to this music and so forth, and let that kind of guide you as you navigate the matrix and all the ins and outs. That's kind of what's helped me probably the most, is like my why, to inspire other Pacifica artists and to really express who I am as an artist and support Pacifica stories, support the Pacific through music. I've always had that, and when times get hard, that's the kind of thing that gives me the impetus and the drive to push through. Yeah.
Wow. I'm playing a little bit of Mama's music box. I hope people can appreciate, there's so much of the body of the work that you're mobile. And thank you very, very much for being online with us to share your music and your power. So love you, brother. Thank you so much. This is a clap from the world.
It's a good love on Elbanor. Pleasure.
Thank you. Take care. Bye
All
bye.
right.
To my pillow